The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hello, I am Joel McLeod, and welcome to the 905. Last week, the Ford government here in Ontario passed Bill 60, the Fighting Delays Building Faster Act. You've probably heard about the act earlier in the year when a clause eliminating indefinite leases was still in the act. That is the long-standing practice of tenant protection, allowing them to maintain their rent as is, as long as the tenant kept paying rent on time. The government has since removed that part of the act. However, for many tenant rights organizations, there is still much in the existing bill to be concerned about. For starters, landlords evicting tenants to use the property for personal use will no longer need to compensate those tenants. As well, the period of time to issue an eviction for non-payment has been reduced from 15 days down to 7. And the time to appeal an eviction order has been reduced from 30 days to 15. The government is saying that these measures will enable to grow the supply in the rental market and to help deal with bad tenants and landlords much more quickly. Critics, however, say otherwise. One such group is Acorn Canada, a tenants' rights organization who has been critical of the Ford government's handling of the rental issue here in Ontario. They have said that this bill erodes tenants' rights and will only worsen evictions and exacerbate the already extreme homeless crisis in our cities. During the debate over Bill 60 in the Legislature, Acorn members were infamously escorted out of the Legislature when they openly voiced their displeasure with the current Ford government. At one point, having Ford turn to one member and tell him to, quote, get a job. I wanted to speak with this group and get their side of this debate and what they are hearing from their membership and what their concerns are with the growing housing insecurity that is prominent in Ontario. So to that end, I welcome Tanya Burkett from Acorn, Ontario, to speak with me today. Have a listen. Thank you to Tanya Burkhardt from Acorn Canada for coming out to talk about the big news this month, which is Ontario's passing of Bill 60, which is supposed to help encourage the building of housing that is badly needed in the province, but there is a slight catch, and that is a big overhaul to the tenant system in Ontario. Tanya, thank you very much for taking the time to come on and talk about this with me.
Thanks for having me, Joel.
I'm going to open up, and I'd like for you just to share with my listeners, what is Acorn's opposition to Bill 60? Because I know you were at the Legislature, very infamously, and just share with our listeners what is your opposition to this bill as it stands right now?
Acorn's opposition to the bill is based on easier eviction for tenants. Housing or homelessness, I should say, has increased to over 80,000 people. And Bill 60, I believe, is just a fast track to increasing homelessness. Tenants want to pay their rent on time. They want to keep a stable roof over their head. And all it takes is a missed payment, an illness, a death. It could be anything that kind of sets them over the edge. And 7 days before you could be evicted or have the eviction process started really isn't fair to tenants. And so we believe Bill 60 is just a fast track to homelessness.
That is the big thing that I think people don't quite appreciate is that 7 days notice that you miss a. And I'm going to kind of broaden it because this has happened to me personally, and so the quote unquote you've missed a payment, and I'm going to give people an example here. My own personal life. I rented an apartment. My wife and I would pay in checks to an office in the building. However, that mailbox where the checks were delivered wasn't always checked on a regular basis. And in some cases, a week or 2 weeks would go by without it being checked. And we would get eviction notices saying, hey, you didn't pay your rent. We said, no, check the office. It's sitting in the inbox. So yeah, I mean that these situations do occur. And I'm wondering if you just, I mean, were you consulted on any situations like this to say like these situations do arise, that it's not a matter of just people being deadbeats on their rent checks, it's life circumstances get in the way. Where is Acorn on proposing this to the minister to enlighten him of these circumstances?
Acorn, as an organization, we're door knocking in buildings and we're speaking to tenants on a super regular basis. In the hour prior to this podcast, I was in a building speaking with tenants who were being evicted out of the building. Their building is going to be demolished for new condos or new housing, purpose-built rental, maybe, who knows. What we see and what we hear on a daily basis is a lot of what you speak about. The landlord will issue an N8 for a blocked portal, or say you're late with your rent, when in reality, it's a direct debit. They didn't do the debit on time, or you pay your rent on the first, they don't electronically receive it till the third. So there's a lot of issues that Bill 60 really doesn't talk about. It just basically is designed to get problematic, or I don't really know what the word, professional tenants who game the system. These are the people that Doug Ford has said they are targeting. This is who FRPO, the Federation of Rental Housing Providers of Ontario, the lobby that is sort of behind Bill 60. This is who they say they're targeting. But in reality, Bill 60 affects all tenants across the province, not just professional tenants. You know, that professional tenants are such a small percentage of tenants as a whole. And I don't know about you, but as a tenant myself, I want to keep a stable roof over my head. I want to advocate for a clean, healthy, safe, livable building. And oftentimes it's the landlord just wants you out. Because if I leave, the landlord's doubling the rent. Guaranteed.
Well, let's dive into that then for a bit. And it is, how hard is it to evict somebody, or basically to evict somebody from a rental property as it stands now in Ontario?
So I always direct people back to the LTB prior to 2018, when service at the LTB was in person. It was very direct. There were no case management hearings. There wasn't the digital divide or digital delays, as I call them. LTB worked then. You know, the landlord and tenant got together in a room and dealt with it with a dispute resolution officer. So the idea that tenants are creating this mess is not true. Doug Ford is the one in 2018 who removed rent control. So now there's all kinds of N13 evictions being applied for because they want to rent tenants out of the building. AGIs, so many buildings that I am in, building after building, they're above guideline rent increases. And it's the Wild West. They can put anything they want on the paper, and as tenants, we're forced to defend it. And so this process is problematic. It was manufactured and created by Doug Ford. Tenants, we didn't change the LTV system. Doug Ford did. So when it's backlogged and landlords are complaining, they're not realizing that it's not us, that, it takes 2 years to get a tenant out. It is a difficult process for landlords, but we didn't create that. Doug Ford did. It wasn't broken until Doug Ford changed it.
The landlord tribunal, that's ultimately what this comes down to, is that we've heard stories of, as you said, the professional tenants, the tenants who move in, they destroy the house or the apartment and stop paying rent, and the landlord is out hundreds, thousands of dollars. I think we can all agree that that's a bad situation. If you're a landlord property, you need to recoup your costs and pay to maintain the property. But that has to be, I always figure that's got to be an easier fix to do. I mean, if you are in arrears on many months worth of rent, it should be a matter of fact of being able to say, no, it's a pretty straightforward solution. You get evicted from the place of residence because clearly you're not paying rent. Would you say that would be an unreasonable directive to give to the landlord tribunal just to clear up the backlogs? Like, yeah, if you haven't paid your rent in 3 months, 4 months, or whatever have you, yeah, that's grounds for eviction from the premises.
I mean, as an organization, we fight to prevent rent evictions or, evictions for arrears owing. And I think that there are other solutions to this issue. As an organization, Acorn would love to see the Ontario government create a provincial rent grant bank or some type of rent grant program where if a tenant falls behind 30 days, 60 days, they should be able to go to that grant or rent bank system, and say, can you please help me out? I need to pay my landlord. And rather than getting to 6 months, a year, have it dealt with at 30 days, 60 days, and give the landlord his money. We want to keep housing. We don't want to discourage good landlords, because ultimately there are good landlords and there are good tenants. There are also bad landlords and bad tenants. So I think it's important not to lump all tenants into that bad category, because that's not the truth. But if the issue could be resolved by making sure that the landlord gets their money, because we want landlords to get paid. We understand that as tenants, we have obligations to meet, and the first is paying our rent. So I think if Doug Ford was truly interested in resolving the backlog at LTB, that is a result of processes that he's put into place and underfunding the LTV, underfunding, understaffing, that's not an issue that's created by tenants. So this sort of blaming, FRPO and landlords blaming tenants, we're sorry that landlords have tenants, professional tenants, who have damaged them financially and otherwise. We don't want to see that either. But there has to be a solution that works for tenants and landlords. You can't have one side without the other, because it's a symbiotic relationship.
Do you think maybe part of this problem, this is taking a step back from just the government, is, I mean, we let this kind of the financialization of housing, is that how many people bought into, you're told buy a house, rent it out, and that's your real estate investment in when you go to retire, right? Pay it off. And a lot of people got into renting out, but got in over their heads, because being a landlord is a big responsibility. I mean, you have to maintain the property, repairs, just maintenance, roof, plumbing, electrical, all that stuff has to be done by the landlord. It's a big investment. And in some cases it does turn into pretty much a full-time job. I'm wondering, do you think that it might be a case of maybe some landlords the mom and pop landlords just got in over their heads with this. The idea of like, oh, it's quick and easy money. I'll buy a couple of houses in a couple condos. I'll rent them out, and I'm gonna sit back and watch the checks roll in. And to realize, no, housing people is a bit more detailed, a bit more of a responsibility than just what they were sold.
Absolutely. I think I'm sure no one expected mortgage rates to do what they've done. Um, I think as the cost of upkeep goes up, you have property taxes, you have so many other things, and I'm sure a lot of small landlords are finding it very, very difficult. That's not because of bad tenants. Those are market conditions far beyond tenants' control. So I don't know. I always encourage good landlords to keep doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is difficult to be a landlord. I think it does come with a lot of responsibilities and obligations. And it's the same for tenants. We have responsibilities and obligations too. And so I just think LTV needs to be overhauled. I think there's a lot missing from the Residential Tenancies Act. And I think Doug Ford is just looking at it from a legislative point of view. And he's just using bad tenants as a scapegoat. That small percentage of professional tenants, he's applying that as a paintbrush to everyone. And I'm sure there's a lot of landlords out there, small landlords who are thinking Bill 60 is not going to help me. And they're probably right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't understand why a hearing should take 2 years, for a landlord or for a tenant. I mean, tenant applications for disrepair, it's probably longer than 2 years.
Well,
So there's no justice for us and there's no justice for landlords.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something I wanted to touch upon. Is that a lot of this is focused on the tenant side of it. The as you said, the professional tenant bit and whatnot. I don't see a lot in reverse of putting onus on landlords or punishing landlords for failing to hold up to their end. So, yeah, the good landlords, that they maintain their properties, they they're they do what they're supposed to do. The bad landlords, though, the ones that are not keeping the property in good repair, they're the ones that, let's call them what they are, slumlords. There is no punishment for those ones. There's nothing saying like you're banned from renting out. If you say hypothetically evict somebody from their place of residence, but you get found to be a slumlord by the landlord tribunal, there's no penalty for that. There's nothing saying you're not allowed to house anybody until we've cleared this mark off your record, kind of thing, right? And put the onus on them to fix it. Or am I wrong? Do you know of any such mechanism that you could hold a landlord to account for having substandard living conditions, aside from just running the building code?
I mean, tenants have filed at LTD. We encourage them to do so for harassment, disrepair, and we try to teach them file a T2 or a T6, get your abatements, get the issue addressed, ask for a remedy from the LTB, and that's typically in terms of a rent reduction. There are penalties for, Doug Ford has said he's increased the fines up to $100,000 for an illegal eviction. But really, the LTB lacks enforcement. I'm sure fines have been assessed to bad actors who are the slumlords. And have they paid? If a judgment is given to a tenant for $5,000 for repairs that he had to make because of a leak, who enforces that $5,000 gets paid? There's no enforcement, absolutely none. So I don't think slumlords, this Bill 60 will have any, I don't know, any punishments or it doesn't address any of the enforcement issues or penalty issues that tenants really need in place. So I don't know. Bill 60 is, I don't think it's really designed to help the people it's supposed to help. And I
Mhm.
think it just makes it easier for evictions. Homelessness is absolutely going to increase with Bill 60.
We've heard of the stories in the news, but as you mentioned before, cases of run eviction, where a landlord wants to renovate a property, so they force the existing tenant out on the street. I know in my neighborhood, I've had a family given their marching orders because uh, the landlord wanted a family to move in, a new family to move in, or sorry, a family member move in. Um, and these things, how we've heard stories all of this all over Ontario. And this is the norm. Like there are so many loopholes to find a reason to evict somebody. If you know, are is there why wouldn't we look at closing those instead? Uh, to evict somebody, like what is it? I don't understand why we don't. I don't even know why these things exist on the books. Like, why can't you just kick somebody out because you say I want a family member to move into the basement apartment or into a house that I own?
Mm. There are a lot of loopholes. I think the Residential Tenancies Act has a lot of loopholes and a lot of things that favor landlords. Um, Bill 60 in particular removed the 30 days of or 1 month's compensation from an N12, which is family use um, eviction. So if they give 4 months notice, they have to give the tenant zero compensation. So when he says that, when the housing minister says he's not removing tenant protections, they exist. Um, they're just different. Um, I think that's disingenuous. I think that's misinformation. Because if you're removing tenant compensation, you are removing a tenant's right. A tenant has the right to that compensation. And so I think the the N12 loophole is, I don't know, it's just that it's a loophole. And we've had many um evictions using N12,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in additional rental units, basement units, apartments within a dwelling. Um, and it's just another way
The
to get somebody out and move somebody else in. So there's no stability of tenure. I don't think the LTV really accounts for stability of tenure for tenants. Absolutely.
what what are the ramifications for this on a tenant? You know, the very nature of rental uh, can be somewhat precarious. You know, you're talking about a month to month payment. It's much like a mortgage, but you the worry about being in a situation where missing a payment or a payment getting lost in the shuffle, so to speak, and you're being told you're out by the end of the week. What does that do to a person? Like, what are you hearing from people as you're knocking door to door? What are their fears, or what? I'm trying to get an idea of like what's the human face to this. We're talking a lot of numbers, we're talking a lot of forms, we're talking a
Mhm.
lot of bureaucracy, and at the end of the day, this is people. These are families that are potentially at risk of being out on the street now in 7 days, uh, potentially. I'm trying to get a sense of what you're hearing from people as you're talking with them about where their mind's at right now.
I think absolutely the first reaction is fear because an eviction process beginning, it's not that they're going to be evicted in 7 days, but the eviction process can begin at 7 days. So there's a lot of fear. So it makes it easier to evict. It's absolutely like, what would happen to me?
Mm-hmm.
So initial gut reaction is fear. I think the next reaction is anger, frustration, because we have to fight AGIs. They're monstrous, they're awful, they're technical, and in digital format, it's absolutely brutal. So AGIs are simply a form to bypass rent control. So on an eviction, like if you get the eviction hearing, now you have to pay half of what is allegedly owed, even before it's been determined if a tenant actually owes that amount, to raise any maintenance issues in an eviction hearing. This smacks of pay to play. You can only raise the issues if you've paid to raise them. So absolutely egregious for tenants. So I think there's a lot of anger. I think there's a lot of fear. Absolutely. One of the first messages someone sent me was, I'm an organizer and it puts a target on my back and I could really be in trouble. And I said, yes, me too. I'm an organizer. Don't have a great relationship with my landlord because my landlord's a slumlord. And I just said, I could be in the tent beside you. I'm a multi-generation family. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother. I have 2 children plus a grandson. So I'm a family of 5. So finding a 3-bedroom is not the easiest thing. So I just think the initial reaction is fear, anger, frustration, because LTB and housing are already so complicated and so difficult. So it's just another layer of garbage she's smeared in the process.
I guess that's just it. You're talking about this thing that's just been sticking in my mind as we've been talking, and I know because this is your life, so you're in with the nomenclature, with the terminology of forms and all the acronyms, and it just strikes me how complicated and twisted around the whole process of rent is.
Mm-hmm. Agreed there.
Well, if we're trying to solve the housing crisis, like the getting people out off the streets, which I think we can all agree, conservative, liberal, NDP, Acorn, but Doug Ford, we can all agree we don't want encampments anymore in our cities. Why wouldn't we make the process easier to get into a house? Like, shouldn't that be the step one of how do we make the rental process easier to get into a house? Or is it this a way just easier to make money? Because I can't imagine you have the money to go hire a lawyer, to go sit down with a lawyer to make sure that you're getting the best deal for your buck.
I think housing is complicated by a lot of what goes on at the federal level. The financialization of housing is devastating for renters. There's no security of tenure. Landlord wants you out at all costs, whether it's a cash for keys buyout, whether it's a no-fault eviction. And then rent skyrockets from that. So I think when we talk about the housing crisis, I think there's supply because large corporate landlords want cheap old buildings because it's cheaper to buy them than it is to build them. So they're buying up all these older buildings that have affordable housing. So our affordable housing is being targeted by corporations. So I think that creates a lot of complexity. They know how to use the system. At the provincial level, I don't think the LTV does enough to protect tenants. I think a lot of the changes that Ford has made it increasingly complicated. Digital formats, underfunding, understaffing, legislative changes. It should be easy. Tenants should be able to have a stable month-to-month lease without any worries. Here's the rent check and done. But then it's complicated by things like rent evictions. Get them out, make more money. So I think at different levels of government, have added different layers of complexity to this. And the housing that's being built now is typically luxury housing. It's unaffordable and it's not under rent control.
Right.
So I think it's complicated by so many things at different levels of government.
Well,
And municipalities,
mm-hmm.
When we talk about homelessness and encampments, Doug Ford and the federal government really don't care because municipalities and cities are the ones that pick up the municipal bills for homelessness and removing encampments. So they can apply for funding. They can apply to the provincial and federal government to receive funding back, but are they going to get it in the amount that they need or to cover what they spent?
Go sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm okay. I'm done.
I yeah, you mentioned that the housing being built today is the luxury McMansions that we're seeing. You know, they're all
Mhm.
as we're trying to build on the green belt. And that's what I don't see how this encourages rental purpose housing being built. Uh, other than like I'm trying to rationalize why would I, if I was a developer, why would I want to build a rental purpose building um, when or landlord to evict people on the get like the system right now. If I can evict you from your home, the purpose usually is either I want to sell the home outright to make a profit on it, or I want to, as you say, renovate it, tear it down, turn it into condos, and then I get money that way. I don't see how this system builds more rental supply into the market, or how this bill will do that. If anything, it just makes it easier for landlords to get the money out of their property. Um, that's not really a question; it's more just an observation as we've been discussing. I'm afraid.
Mhm.
Um,
I don't I don't think Bill 60 has any impact for developers and creating housing supply. He said that maybe more smaller landlords will want to rent out their houses and spaces, um, knowing there's more protections and it will be faster for them to get out a bad tenant. And maybe that will occur, maybe, but it's not the housing supply that we need. And purpose-built rental, I live in a city that's really prioritizing purpose-built rental, and they're doing that by the region has um, basically waived 50% of the development charges. Federal government has removed the HST on new builds. So, and my city has actually agreed to reimburse 100% of the development charges. So now developers are coming in, we're going to build, but they're building condos. So we're not sure. That's why I say we're not sure if we're going to get condos or we're going to get purpose-built rental. And none of it will be under rent control. None of it will be affordable. Um, and what they're doing is demolishing the older buildings. Like I said, in the hour before, I was in a building where I think 42 affordable units will be destroyed. And they're going to put up 3 towers. So,
can I
um,
can I ask you, of those 42 units, what are the people in those units planning to do?
Um, a lot of them are long-term tenants. The last lady I spoke with had been there 42 years. She's 82 years old and lives on a fixed income. So she can't afford market rent. She has mobility issues and requires an accessible unit. Again, um, new housing out there isn't going to meet her needs. She's probably not going to be able to afford it. I don't know what is going to happen to her. We're trying to go before city council to get a rental replacement bylaw. So demolition, in the case of demolition, tenants will be able to return to the new development at the same rent they were paying before. But city council has again deferred this file. So I know that municipalities who have to pay the bills for homelessness and removing encampments are willing to pass anti-rent-eviction bylaws, rental replacement bylaws, landlord licensing. They're willing to put those protections in place because they understand that these bylaws, who Acorn has pretty much created a lot of these concepts and bylaws, and they want to put those in place because it's homelessness prevention. So if you can bring down the cost of from let's say 12,000 to I don't know 2,000 to keep so these protections and these mechanisms, rent bank, it's literally homelessness prevention. So I don't know. Bill 60 isn't going to do any of that. It's actually going
We're,
to increase.
we're almost wrapped up on our episode anyways, so I just wanted to um I would be remiss if, as a member of Acorn, I didn't ask you about this. Infamously now, with at the passing of this Bill 60, one of your members was in the gallery of the legislature, audibly protesting the bill. Premier Doug Ford turned to them and yelled out, "Go find a job," as they were escorted out of the legislature. I'm not going to ask you to speak on that person's behalf, but I do want to get a sense of what's the attitude towards the government at the moment. Is there any ounce of good faith? Is there any ounce of goodwill that maybe some movement can be move forward on this, or are we just where's your head at when you see that, when you hear that in your membership?
As an Acorn member, hearing Doug Ford say, "Just get a job," it was just disrespectful. He's making assumptions and generalizations about that person. He was a person with a disability who'd worked 20 years in IT. He'd been evicted out of a building. And he was going to college to basically better himself and update his career. So to hear Doug Ford just disrespectfully speak to someone like that, it's really discouraging. And if he had held public consultations and meetings that are typically done when bills are introduced and it's part of a democratic legislative process, had he done that, we could have spoken at those public meetings and consultations. We have repeatedly sent Doug Ford letters to MPPs, multiple MPPs, asking for him. We constantly ask him to meet, to discuss things, and he does not. So we're always open to discussion, even now. If he called Acorn Canada's office and said, "Would you like to meet?" we would be like, absolutely. We work with any and all political parties. We consider ourselves, apolitical or bipartisan, and we'll work with anybody who wants to meet with us and speak with us. And so we're a peaceful organization. I just really think that what he said and what he has said after the fact about us as an organization is untrue. We're not a radical organization. We're a union of low and moderate income people. We're everyday people. And I just think it's just Trump-style anti-democratic intimidation. And he's trying to silence us with lots of audits and, we take money from people. I'm like, our membership is funded by us, by our members who pay dues. And we're like any other nonprofit. We receive donations from other people. So no different than any other nonprofit organization. So yes, there is goodwill. We would love to meet with Doug Ford and talk about what's going on, what we can do to fix it. I've spoke earlier in this podcast about a rent grant bank to get landlords their money faster. Has he thought about that? So we're constantly trying to meet with people and come up with solutions. And we're not a radical organization.
I'll leave it at that as the last word. Thank you very much, Tanya Burkett from Acorn Canada, for coming on to talk about Bill 60 and the state of tenancy in Ontario as it stands today. Thank you very much for taking time to come on today.
Thanks, Joel.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Hi, it's Ashley and Jess with Wellness Reality Check. We are two health practitioners, moms, and best friends trying to navigate the world of holistic health in a balanced, productive way that brings health to our lives instead of dogmatic extremes. We'll be breaking down health trends, interviewing your favorite health influencers, and always keeping it real. We hope this podcast brings listeners back down to earth, providing a dose of reality in the often idealized world of health and wellness.
Wellness Reality Check. Follow the show now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at wellnessrealitycheck.com.
Hi, I'm Marianne Weisenthal, host of the LifeSpeak podcast, a show where we dive into real conversations about mental health, resilience, and navigating life's everyday challenges. Each episode, I sit down with leading experts in health, work, and wellness to unpack big topics like burnout, parenting, leadership, anxiety, and personal growth. My guests share their own stories of struggle and resilience, and together we keep it honest, relatable, and practical. Whether you're looking for fresh perspectives or just a moment to feel seen and supported, you'll find it on the LifeSpeak podcast.